Hello and welcome to FE Explains. I'm Roshan Puvaya. There's not much of a difference between geopolitical relationships and regular friendships. Remember how in life you have friends and you also have frenemies. That one friend who says they're your bestie, but then charges you for every single thing. That kind of defines the trade relationship between the United States and India. Let's face it, US President Donald Trump is a shrewd businessman, and he is using those traits as the president of the country. Even as India and the US negotiate a trade agreement, Trump this week announced a 25% tariff on Indian goods from August 1, with an additional but unspecified penalty for India's defense and energy imports from Russia. In a post on social media platform Truth Social, Trump said India has the most strenuous and obnoxious non-monetary trade barriers of any country. The point is that Indian exports to the US will get more expensive. Put simply, something sold for $100 in the US will now cost $125. Let's deal with why these tariffs are being imposed. Here are a few key reasons from a US standpoint. First, the trade deficit. The US goods trade deficit, or the difference between how much it imports from India versus how much it sells to India, was $45.7 billion in 2024, up about 5.4% from 23. This growing imbalance has been a concern for Trump, who views such deficits as an unfair trading relationship. Next is India's alleged non-monetary trade barriers. The US considers India's agricultural subsidies and measures for food safety as constraints for US exports. These measures prevent food and plants being imported with high levels of pesticide or not meeting certain quality standards. While India sees this as a necessary implement for domestic food security and safety standards, Washington sees it as limiting American agricultural access to Indian markets. Then there's India's BRICS membership. Most global trade happens with the dollar as the underlying currency. But the BRICS bloc, that is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, is seen as anti-dollar and a challenge to the American economic dominance. India's discussions on alternative payment systems and trade mechanisms have Washington worried about the long-term relevance of the dollar in global trade. And finally, India's relationship with Russia. Trump announced an unspecified penalty because India has been buying defense and fuel supplies from Russia. While the amount hasn't been specified so far, the US, in its proposed Russian Sanctions Act 2025, aims to impose 500% duties on countries that buy oil or other petroleum products from Russia. This penalty is one that could hurt. Reports indicate that some oil refiners in India have halted Russian crude oil purchases and instead have bought them from the UAE and other Gulf nations. So what are the exports from India that could get hit? Gems and jewelry is one export sector that could feel the heat. The US runs a significant trade deficit with India here. India exported about $10 billion worth of jewelry last year to the US. That sparkly Surat diamond necklace that you are eyeing in Manhattan, it just got dearer by 25%. Clothing is another sector with many retailers in the US sourcing high quality clothing from India. The cost of these clothes will become more expensive now. Then there's generic pharmaceuticals. The US gets a huge chunk of its generic drugs from India. So the next time you go to the pharmacy, your pharmacist might just say, that medication for your stress, it's now going to cause you a little more stress. Around 40% of US generic drugs comes from India. However, currently the US has exempted pharma exports from certain tariffs. So this will stay accessible. In electronics, remember Apple starting to manufacture iPhones in India? Apple thought it was smart moving production to India to avoid Chinese tariffs. But that's backfired. It's like moving from the frying pan into the fire. Besides these sectors, the secondary sanctions that Trump plans to impose on countries doing business with Russia could hurt far more. Since it's so far unspecified, this can cause uncertainty in global markets. Hence the pause on Russian oil purchases, as I mentioned. India, on the other hand, imports much less from the US. The total value of imports from the US was $45.3 billion, while India's exports were $86.5 billion in 2024-25. India does have high tariffs on imports. For example, an imported car attracts between 70% to 110% in duties. On agricultural imports, India charges as much as 39%. On soft drinks, it's between 48% and 52%. So should India make a deal? To quote a line from Kenny Rogers' song, The Gambler, India should know when to hold them, know when to fold them, know when to walk away, and know when to run. It's a gamble, all right. The thing is, these tariffs may be a big deal for India's economy, but there are several ways out. Note that trade negotiations are still going on and could extend up to October. In fact, in April, Trump had announced reciprocal tariffs of 26% for India, and now it's at 25%. As they say, the bargaining is on. This might not be the final price. This whole thing could just be very loud, very public way of asking for a better deal. It's like a negotiation tactic, but instead of a boardroom, it's happening on Truth Social. They say politics makes strange bedfellows. In today's unpredictable world, you never know what's going to happen when it comes to international trade. A deal today, gone tomorrow. Just brace for the long-term impact. Follow financialexpress.com for more such news that you could use. Let me know in the comments what India should do in the wake of these tariffs.